December 7, 1944. The workshop cavern beneath the shattered railway station at Hoffelise, Ardennes forest. The air was thick with the smell of lubricating oil, spent coal smoke, and the metallic tang of dried blood. Feldwebel Dieter Kleist, a veteran motor pool chief with a face permanently etched by the cold of the Eastern Front, leaned over the chassis of a captured American vehicle. The official designation was Willys MB, but the Americans called it a Jeep. It was the first intact model his Instandsetzungs company had recovered since the invasion of France, and it was a ghost of a machine, small, light, and startlingly simple. Kleist held a pair of calipers, measuring the gauge of the sheet metal. 1/8 thick, perhaps less in some non-critical sections. A destroyer's hull, he mused, required steel plates measured in inches, not fractions. What none of them knew was that this small, unarmored vehicle, designed for simple transport and reconnaissance, was about to become a focal point of grudging admiration within the German Army's technical corps, challenging their fundamental assumptions about military design, reliability, and mass production. For years, the German military had prided itself on the complexity and high engineering standards of its mechanized vehicles, from the legendary Tiger tanks to the versatile Kettenkrad half-track. But this Jeep, with its Spartan design and pragmatic construction, represented a starkly different philosophy, a philosophy of industrial output and universal utility that the Wehrmacht had consistently underestimated. The American advance through Europe had been an avalanche of men and material. Since the landings in Normandy, the sheer volume of Allied supplies and the robust performance of their standard-issue equipment had created a logistical nightmare for the German defense. The German Army's reliance on specialized, over-engineered vehicles, while providing tactical superiority in certain combat conditions, had become a strategic liability. Their half-tracks and heavy trucks, designed for specific roles and built with a meticulousness that demanded high-precision manufacturing and rare alloys, were difficult to mass-produce and time-consuming to repair. Their engines were masterpieces of precision engineering, yet sensitive to low-quality field fuels and prone to catastrophic failure under deferred maintenance. Admiral Karl Donit's strategy for the final defense was straightforward: conserve fuel. Prioritize the heaviest armor. Make every attack count. The Americans might own the skies with their ubiquitous P-51 fighters, but the winter ground, thick with mud and ice, belonged to German determination and heavy engineering. Without the specialized repair and recovery units, the 20-ton panzers and high-performance engines of the German mechanized divisions would become frozen, irreparable hulks within weeks. The Jeep represented American industrial ingenuity pushed to practical limits. Captured supply manifestos indicated that the first production models had arrived in North Africa in late 1941. Each Willys MB displaced just 2,400 pounds, or approximately 1 1/10 metric tons. Length 133 inches, or 3.38 meters. Beam 62 inches, or 1.57 meters. Draft, or rather ground clearance, 8 inches, shallow enough to traverse muddy fields and rough tracks where heavier Kübelwagen often became bogged down. Oberleutnant Karl-Heinz Voss, a young engineering officer from Stuttgart, commanded the Instandsetzungstruppe that had recovered the vehicle, examining its simple structure in the dim light. The armament was negligible. A single .30 caliber machine gun, pintle mounted for anti-aircraft or limited ground support, a weapon Voss considered laughably light for serious combat. The vehicle carried no meaningful armor, relying entirely on speed and its small profile for survival. But the Jeep's primary weapon was its versatility. It was powered by a single Willys 4-cylinder L-head engine, generating 60 horsepower. Maximum speed 65 miles per hour on a paved road, though 40 miles per hour was more realistic over cross-country terrain. By comparison, the standard German light utility vehicle, the Kübelwagen Type 82, managed only 50 miles per hour at best and was strictly two-wheel drive. The Jeep, however, possessed four-wheel drive with a two-speed transfer case, a feature that immediately caught Kleist's attention. In the confined and often snowbound terrain of the Ardennes, all-wheel drive meant the difference between mobility and abandonment. The hull construction defied traditional German vehicle-building principles. It was a simple, flat-panel, box-on-frame design. The entire vehicle could be manufactured in less than 100 man-hours at a cost estimated at less than 1,000 American dollars. A German Kübelwagen required over 200 man-hours and cost substantially more in raw material and specialized labor. Motor mechaniker Erster Klasse Hans Becker had spent 6 months learning every nuance of the captured engine. Becker, a former apprentice at the Mercedes-Benz factory in Sindelfingen, was accustomed to the high tolerances and complex parts of German engines. "This engine is simple, Feldwebel," Becker explained to Kleist. "The tolerances are generous. The ignition timing is fixed. Any field mechanic can fix it with a basic toolkit. We are used to engines that require high-octane fuel and precise adjustments. This Willys engine will run on almost anything and still deliver 90% of its power." Becker had modified a carburetor from a captured American truck to improve cold weather starting. He developed a pre-drive checklist that included simply checking the oil and water, a shocking contrast to the complex warm-up procedures required for high-performance German armored vehicle engines. His simplicity would keep the Jeep operational when sophisticated German vehicles had long since been immobilized. Major Klaus Rüdiger stood next to the vehicle, a staff officer from the 6th Panzer Army, recently arrived from the Russian front. He was leading a reconnaissance unit tasked with pushing through the American lines during the coming offensive. 20 years in the Wehrmacht had taught him to value firepower and armor above all else. Every shadow might hide an enemy partisan. Every unpaved road could be a path to immobilization. Tonight's mission: deliver a message to a forward panzer detachment isolated near Bastogne. The road was barely cleared of snow, treacherous, and under intermittent enemy artillery observation. The Jeep's main vulnerability was its utter lack of protection. The flat windscreen offered no bullet deflection, and the canvas top was purely for weather. At 133 inches long, it was certainly maneuverable, but its large exposed wheels made it vulnerable to mines and small arms fire. Her 60-horsepower engine was loud, and the large open cabin was a liability in the bitter cold. Against a simple American infantry patrol with automatic rifles, the Jeep's advantages evaporated. The first test run. December 15, 1944. 2,300 hours. The Jeep, bearing crudely painted German markings and driven by Becker, idled outside the tunnel entrance. The engine, muffled by the low RPM, ran smoothly. No radio communication, only shielded flashlights and hushed commands. Major Rüdiger, against his better judgment, sat in the passenger seat, his Schmeisser machine pistol resting on his lap. The plan was simple: drive quickly to the panzer detachment, deliver the coded message, and return before dawn. Becker switched the transfer case into four-wheel drive low for maximum traction in the thick snow. At 23:35, Rüdiger gave the signal. Becker pushed the throttle forward. The Jeep leaped to 15 kilometers per hour, closing rapidly on the snowy track. The standard Wehrmacht reconnaissance doctrine called for slow, cautious movement to conserve fuel and avoid detection. But with its simple engine and low value, the Jeep permitted a more reckless approach. They approached a sharp incline, where Rüdiger fully expected the vehicle to lose traction and become stuck, forcing them to proceed on foot. This section had stopped 3 of their own heavier Sonderkraftfahrzeuge utility cars the previous night. The Jeep, however, dug its large tires into the snow, the low-end torque pulling it steadily uphill. At the summit, the Jeep crested with effortless power, a performance that immediately challenged Rüdiger's deeply held belief in heavy, specialized German traction engineering. A flare burst overhead, illuminating the surrounding pine trees in a harsh white light. The distinctive crack of a .50 caliber machine gun opened fire from an unseen American position, spraying rounds into the snow around the Jeep. Becker instinctively threw the wheel hard left, zigzagging violently at 30 kilometers per hour. The small vehicle responded instantly, its low center of gravity keeping it stable as it swerved off the main track and into the shelter of the trees. The light weight and quick steering allowed for evasive action that would have flipped a heavier German vehicle. They claimed possible damage from the close call, but the light construction proved surprisingly resilient, with only a few non-critical bullet holes punched through the bodywork. More importantly, the attack had forced the Americans to reveal their position, allowing a German mortar team to calculate a counter-barrage. The first indication that the Jeep could serve as a valuable scouting tool, forcing enemy fire and disrupting operations even without engaging in direct combat. The disruption of the patrol convinced the Oberkommando des Heeres to officially study the captured Jeep. By January 1945, 3 intact Jeeps operated from the motor pool in Hofelize. Additional engineers arrived with new directives developed through hard experience. Understand the machine. Intelligence revealed the Willys Overland and Ford production schedules, thousands of vehicles being produced every month. Route predictable, they were everywhere, on every road, in every column. Analyzing the American philosophy. General Oberst Heinz Guderian's staff developed new technical doctrine based on the early encounters. The Jeeps were not to be viewed as combat vehicles, but as symbols of a different industrial strategy. German engineers would operate in teams of 3. One team would strip a captured Jeep to its frame, analyzing the metallurgy and welding. A second team would study the parts catalog and maintenance manuals, trying to determine the interchangeability of components. When a Jeep broke down, which happened rarely, the parts would be analyzed not for engineering perfection, but for ease of manufacture and repair. Following the catastrophic losses during the Russian retreat, the Jeep became one element in a broader effort to rationalize German vehicle production. While they couldn't match the superior armor and firepower of German vehicles, their simplicity and abundance forced changes in German technical strategy. A detailed report to the Waffenamt noted that the Jeep's design allowed for field repairs in hours that would take days for a complex German vehicle. Though most Wehrmacht officers focused on their own advanced designs, the constant stream of captured American equipment, specifically the Jeep, forced German commanders to maintain a focus on logistical vulnerability, something the enemy seemed to overcome with sheer quantity.